we're going to talk about today. Thanks for joining us, first of all. We've got a really interesting topic, I think, to discuss. You can't open up any kind of news feed, read anything without reading about Chat GPT or AI in general, or how AI is going to take over the whole world. And we think here at 2W, we've been using AI for well over a year now, and integrating it into our systems. And it is a revolutionary shift to the way we do business. And the people who are responsible for saying those kinds of things, and the thought leaders, that's exactly what they're saying. Is this is a revolutionary shift in the way that we will create documents, the way we will find documents, and in some case, some analytics. We are just at the infancy of the AI revolution, but I think we've got some really good ideas here where we can show you how you can implement AI in your business today. The key thing to remember when you think about AI is it's only as good as your data. The information that's there and the security that you put around it is only going to be as good. That's going to drive what your output is. And one of the things I know that there's a huge concern with, in fact, in a Gartner study, 60% said that they're concerned with data loss, oversharing, and content sprawl. And so we're going to give you a couple of ideas where you can help that. I mean, if you think about it, if you have AI generating documents and then analyzing those documents and then generating more documents, you can create a situation where you can get a lot of nonsense relatively quickly. So Tom, let's first, did that slide change?
Yep.
Okay. First, let's talk about just general words and nomenclature that we're going to be talking about today, just to remind everybody what it is. So, large language model, right? LLM. You hear AI, and then you hear large language model. What does that mean?
Yeah, so that's a great place to start. So large language models in general are statistical models that started back in the late 60s, early 70s, using statistics to analyze language, spoken and written language. And large language models are essentially when you're taking and extending that to general use cases rather than very specific cases. So a specific case, you might be, evaluating, is this thing red, blue, or green? It's a very narrow language model. A large model is using statistics to look at very large sets to come up with effectively natural language. So especially, a lot of the work started in English, but it's extended to other languages. So, but language in general.
So, and then we're going to talk about knowledge mining. So it's not so much data mining, but it's the knowledge of your business. And knowledge mining typically sits in two different areas. There's structured and unstructured. So unstructured would be like Word would be unstructured, text files, maybe some emails would be unstructured. Structured would be your databases, your SQL databases, your ERP or CRM, stuff like that. And then, of course, there's kind of the in-between, Excel files, and some of that will be structured, some of that's unstructured. And how we work with those is going to be different in the way that it interfaces with your artificial intelligence. So we take all of that structured and unstructured data, Tom, and we ground it. What does that mean?
Yeah, actually, I just a little bit more about knowledge mining, just because I think it'll help us here. Knowledge mining, you think of mining your data. I mean, that's really what we're talking about. And Mark touched on a couple of ways that it could be stored. But one of the key places where you see knowledge mining is in summarization. So, I've got this 20-page technical document and I want to summarize it down into an executive overview, or give me the bullet points for this email chain. And you'll see, we'll talk about some examples of that later. But another place, and the reason I mentioned this around grounding here, is around auditing and risk and compliance management. So when you're mining that, an automated knowledge mining might be looking for legal concepts, or might be looking for proprietary information or confidential information. So some of you might use Microsoft Purview and other data loss stuff. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about that. but those can use knowledge mining as well, which then leads us to the grounded data, right? So when we're talking about what, grounded data and grounding, we're talking about the basis for, so we've got that large language model that understands language in general, but you usually don't care about all knowledge everywhere or all language everywhere. You care about the language and the knowledge that's specific to whatever your use case is. So when we're talking about grounded or grounding, we're talking about tying off and using a subset. There's all kinds of science and math involved in that, and then we're not really interested in that here. But grounded, like these are our company culture documents, so I want everything to reflect those in some way, or don't go veering off in some other direction. Use this set of process documentation on how to use our ERP system. And so grounding, giving a basis for the answers or the conversation that you're about to have.
Yeah, so and as you go along, so there's kind of the systemized grounding, and then as you move, you may be grounding in a small subset of data just for that particular use case.
Yeah.
And then the basic applications, there's a whole bunch of them. There's the computer vision, there's the looking for errors in your product as it goes past the assembly line. There's the robotic automation. There's the AI that creates the pictures when you give them a prompt. Show me a picture of a robot riding a unicorn on a rocket. And then there's natural language processing, and we're going to talk almost exclusively today about utilizing NLP in the applications in both Copilot and Resolve IQ, which is our plugin that we've developed here over the last year or so. So natural language processing is the prompt that you give it in natural words, right? So give me a summary of this email, or what does this particular module do in Epicor, say? And so just talking to the AI in the way that you would talk with your fingers type, the way that you would communicate with really anybody else, in the way that you would communicate it, and have that result also come back as just natural language in the way that you would develop it. And then Tom, we want to talk about Copilot, because Copilot dropped for the rest of us essentially a couple of weeks ago, and so we've been using it and experimenting with it over the last 15 days or so, I guess. Talk a little bit about just Copilot versus language models, what people know with ChatGPT. Just kind of talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's so Microsoft Copilot, really Copilot is a suite of different, right now it's a lot of separate pieces within the Microsoft universe. So you'll see Copilot for Bing, Copilot for Enterprise, Copilot for Security, Copilot, you'll see all these different Copilots. And you can think of Copilot really like the word means. It's the guy in the passenger seat helping you out with the navigation, or watching for the sign for the next exit, or whatever. It's riding along with you, helping you out while you still do the driving or flying, I guess, in the case of pilot, right? So Microsoft has been releasing these Copilots for Windows. I mean, there are more for the last 9 months, at least since last July, maybe a little bit sooner. Actually, I think the first one that we started working with was last May. But the biggie, the Microsoft Copilot or Copilot for Microsoft 365, is kind of the big one that became generally available a couple of weeks ago, and that had been in restricted use before, and now it's generally available. What that Copilot does is, first of all, it tries to bring all those other ones together, so they all can be plugins to this sort of master Copilot, and it has access to your Microsoft 365 tenant, and you have control over that. And we're going to talk about controls and safety and all that kind of stuff. but it can access the things that you have, the data that you have stored in SharePoint, the data that you have stored in Entra ID, or formerly Azure Active Directory, the data in your Exchange calendar, the data in your email and Exchange Online, like that. So that all that Microsoft 365 data. Caitlin, great question. We'll come back to that, but we want to hit on that for sure. So we've got all these different capabilities. Those all, Copilot starts to wrap all of those up. It is a general purpose language model, a general purpose tool, and it's exposed in a lot of Microsoft applications. So we'll talk, Mark, I think that hits what you're.
Yeah. And so let's talk a little. So we've been doing, so without Copilot, we've been experimenting with and productively using artificial intelligence here at 2W for the better part of a year, if not more. And so, Tom, just take us through a quick timeline of what we've done, what we've experienced, et cetera.
Yeah, so the big move toward the what you think of, or what most people think of, as AI today, really you could go back around 1996, 97, somewhere in there, where OpenAI was founded. Microsoft invested heavily in that early on, I think $1 billion initial investment. They started developing GPT, this general purpose, right? Those tools really took a huge turn in 2022 with ChatGPT at the end of 2022, maybe November, I think, October. Microsoft and other investors recognized that. Microsoft turned around and put another 10 or 11 billion dollars into it as well, along with a bunch of others. So by the beginning of 2023, actually the slide says late 2023, at the beginning of 2023, those GPT tools were out there and available to people, and end of 2022, beginning of 2023. So at the beginning of 2023, we started moving from what we were doing with Azure Cognitive Services, where we were doing some very narrow use cases, and we started moving to these natural language ones. And how could we integrate that into our tools? We're a managed services provider, we're a cloud solutions provider, we're an Epicor consultancy. We've got all of these different things that we do, these different customer bases and knowledge bases that we command. And how do we start to use those tools internally? And so one of the first things we recognized is that we needed to have a strategy. And Mark, you just want to kind of talk through our strategy?
Yeah, sure. So, and this is what we would recommend you do first is what do you want to do with AI, and how do you see it impacting your business? And so we came up with a very high level strategy on how we were going to address and implement AI. Because if you don't, actually, it can be a bit of a rabbit hole, as you can imagine. So we made the decision that we were going to integrate AI in our digital strategy. So we have integrated AI into our ticketing system. In fact, if you're a 2W client, there's a very, very good chance that you have gotten some sort of a communication that was generated by the AI Resolve IQ. And then we're also integrating. The idea was to take this out to our clients. We made the decision that we're going to let the billion-dollar companies make the hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in investment, and we were going to leverage what was available to us. There is absolutely no reason to reinvent the wheel. That is our advice to you. We have done some heavy lifting on this. Microsoft has done some very, very, very heavy lifting on this. And so we're going to leverage what they're creating in order to be able to bring this down to a narrow focus to make it productive in your business. How do we make this? We really went at this to say, look, we don't want the cool parlor trick of ChatGPT. Gee, isn't that neat? It's how do we really make this productive? How does this work for us? How do we integrate this into our operations to improve both our delivery to our clients as well as the productivity of our people? And then again, and this is a key piece, is how do you protect your data? How do you deploy it so that you're not exposing the data that you don't want to be exposed. And then finally, it was okay. Now, if we can figure this out, how can we get a path for our clients to to take advantage of our lessons learned? And so we're so just a couple of quick takeaways that we get. So we have integrated what we Resolve IQ into our operations in that we use it for a thousand different things, and every day somebody comes up with another application of AI and how it can become productive within our organization. But in a natural language setting, one of the takeaways that kind of surprised me is that the prompts that you give it to get back the information you want is not necessarily intuitive. So you have to communicate. It's just like you learn to communicate with any other being or machine or whatever it is. There are unique ways to do this. And so you want to be able to say, to give the prompt that you get back. And so what happens is if you don't do that and you don't work through that, you can get frustrated and go and just throw up your hands and like, oh, this is stupid. I'm not doing this anymore. Right. And in that case, a generalized version of Copilot actually is kind of like that. And so and the thing to remember is artificial intelligence isn't a thing. It's not this thing. Well, we're just going to do artificial intelligence. It's a set of tools. It's a set of grounded use cases. And if you look at it from that perspective, you will not magically flip a switch and have all your data analyzed and effective and immediately available and summarized. You have to pick your lane, if you will, on how you're going to roll this out. If you do it right, it will save your organization thousands and thousands of hours, and it will revolutionize your business. I'm here to say right now that AI, in all its iterations that we've rolled out, has revolutionized 2W technologies and continues to do so. With the advent of Copilot, we've been able, and some of the other pieces, we've been able to roll out additional functionality to our teammates here, and it is dramatically impacted. In fact, we had a meeting on Friday where we rolled out some new functionality and kind of blew everybody away. And then the other thing is if you don't do it right, it'll be a treadmill. And by that, I mean, just like the treadmill you got for Christmas, where you used it really great for the first 3 or 4 weeks, and eventually you kind of stopped, and then now it's, you're drying your sweaters on it. If you don't do it correctly, and you go too big, or you don't ground the right information into it, it can become not very effective, I guess. Tom, you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, I mean, yeah, not very effective. I think that's a great, becoming the treadmill, becoming the thing that you're hanging your laundry on next year. Yeah, actually getting it usable is important. And there are huge projects that we've taken on and that our clients are taking on and that other, companies are taking on. But having some narrow use cases where you can see benefits and start to learn how these tools affect your business, how they affect your staff, I think is really important to avoiding that treadmill problem. The only bullet I think I might add to this, Mark, I was thinking about this earlier today. It's maybe obvious, but communication, letting people know what's going on. It can be scary. There's a lot of horror stories out there. Oh my God, my job's going to go away. They're not going to need us any, whatever, right? They're going to replace the artists. They're going to replace the copywriters. They're going to, whatever. The programmers. So, communicating. What are you up to? What are you seeing? Mark mentioned, on our all hands call on Friday, we were rolling out some new functionality. We 3 to 4 times a month, I lead a little 5-minute to 10-minute AI corner. Hey, this is what we're doing company-wide with AI. What you can be looking for. Hey, this new functionality is coming. What problems do you see coming? People communicate back. It's a really effective way. And, we've got people, we have a third of our workforce is remote. So just, keeping people in the loop, I think is really a valuable. I know it seems like an obvious bullet, but it's easy to miss on these fast-moving technologies like this.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Tom. So we're going to spend a little bit just talking about what you need to look out for. So, because our first iteration of this is that you want to make everybody productive and do it everywhere all at once. And some of the things you need to be aware of or be cautious of is what is now being called oversharing, which is you want to make sure that the data that you're providing is the appropriate data for the person or the individual who is looking to get the information. So you don't want someone to go to your AI bot and say, hey, how much does this CEO make annually? But if you don't do it right, that information could be in your language model unknown to you unless you go through and systematically keep that stuff out. And we're going to give you a couple of ways to do that. Um, Sometimes AI, especially when it's not grounded properly, will make stuff up. It will hallucinate. Um, it's been interesting working with Copilot versus our Resolve IQ, which has been grounded in our particular company data for an extended period of time. Copilot, when you give it a prompt, will hallucinate and make stuff up. But if you're grounded properly within your documentation, it comes back pretty accurate. Now, you still need to have a human being in the middle. I would never send out something that the AI made and then just send it out without a person in the middle. But it can happen, especially if you're not grounded properly. Um, this is kind of interesting. If you don't protect your data right, if you create the documentation in your AI tool, and then you feed that AI tool into your large language model, it could run away on you. And so you have inaccuracies where the AI has created a hallucinogenic document, and then it becomes fact within your language model. And I'll tell you, right? So, Tom, talk about how Resolve IQ developed a Southern accent the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, so one of the things that we are, so I want to back up just for a moment. We've talked a little bit about Resolve IQ. Resolve IQ is 2W's AI model that we've built internally that it's extensible. It's got access to various pieces of our company data. It's based on Azure OpenAI and various iterations of the GPT model. For those in that world, but Resolve IQ is our internal tool. One of the things that it has access to is our data that's in OneDrive. So we have SharePoint and OneDrive. Some of that is publicly or company shared data, and other parts of it is individual data, my own documents or Mark's documents. The company shared data is partly where it looks for how does 2W communicate? What's 2W's culture? What's 2W's style, right? And that information is updated weekly or daily, actually. So every day it's going through and it's looking to see what changes can be made. Somewhere along the way, a very large Southern cookbook was introduced to our document store, and in fact, several copies of that cookbook. And as near as I can tell, because the timing lines up, that is when Resolve IQ started speaking with or responding with more of a Southern drawl. And removing that and reindexing seems to have or not reindexing, but retraining, it seems to have actually solve that issue. So it's an interesting, it was just an interesting side effect. And we've heard other stories like that when when you're dealing with a smaller subset of data, like we are, again, it's a narrow, these are 2Ws documents, and this is how 2W talks to each other. A relatively small set of, cookbooks, we're able to skew it a little bit.
Yeah, all of a sudden, all the responses back were started with howdy.
Howdy.
Howdy. So, okay, so let's talk about actually productively using this in your business. Enough warnings. So again, we're going to talk about natural language. We're going to talk about speaking with it and communicating, not speaking with it, but speaking with it, communicating with it using the way that you talk to each other and having it respond back to you, as Tom said, unless you're a Southern cookbook author, responding back to you in the way that you would respond. And what we're finding is the very best way to start is pick yourself a narrow use case, whatever it happens to be, whether it's meeting summaries or it's creating or I'm not email summaries, meeting summaries, or creating a customer service, taking your customer service manuals. The narrower you can get, the more accurate it can be, because AI will struggle with that bigger, wider information. So you have 35 years of Word documents stored in a file store someplace. If you dump all that into an AI language model, it's just going to get confusing, right, Tom?
Yeah. So, having all of that different, often conflicting, if you think about your company file share, the public share, whatever you call it inside of your company, that in most companies there are 20 different documents, 10 of which contradict each other. They've gotten created over the years, updated over the years, copies are left all over the place. So dumping everything in there is usually a bad start. But narrower specific ones, we resell, we support, we consult on Epicor ERP, Epicor Kinetic ERP. So one of the questions with the new version of Kinetic that came out, the sales team on that side was, well, so if we want to do X, I don't know, CRM, what modules do we need to make sure are included in the deal? So taking the Epicor documentation, the current version of the Epicor documentation, and only for that use case, putting together a quick little, so we determine, is the user asking about what modules of Epicor should they use? If so, restrict your answer into this area, this set of grounding data. And so it's able to come back with accurate answers, right? Where without that, setting those bumpers around it, it was answering from documents from the web, from our own internal documentation, things like that, which were outdated. So it was answering with modules that don't exist anymore, and it wasn't including new ones. So yeah, getting a narrow use case is a really important part there, and that could look like a lot of different things. Obviously, the data mining, summarization, those tend to be ones. Looking at what you're doing with reporting, dashboards, those are great places for, maybe why don't we set something up that's gaining insights onto this particular set of customer data or shipping data or, vendor data. Those types of narrow use cases. I think I could go on, and we'll probably talk more about other narrow cases.
I think it's the place to start.
Yeah.
And figure out where it is, and then you have to make that data has to be accessible. And I know that sounds pretty obvious, but you'd be surprised. So having it sit in a file share in a server in the server closet is not accessible to Microsoft Cognitive Services. You've got to get that stuff into OneDrive, into SharePoint. You need to have a REST API that you can write into. Just talk a little bit about that, Tom.
Yeah, so that's again, OneDrive, SharePoint, and we're talking about the Microsoft tools here. That's what we're experts in, and that's what we use, and where our experience really lies. But even if you were talking about using a different stack, a different, I don't know if you're going to use Grok or you're going to use one of those. Those are all going to, wherever your data lives, they're going to need access to that data and regular access to that data. So having it on a file share is probably, unfortunately, not the way that you're going to move forward with that. But then the REST API piece at the bottom, I think that's a really important part. So, and I mean, we're saying REST because that's the way our tool works. Other APIs are acceptable, but REST is very common. That's a standard way of accessing your data. So I'm going to take Epicor ERP as an example. If I have data that's in Epicor, if I've got, I don't know, inventory, part headers or part tables, right, in Epicor, that data is available through the Epicor REST API, so I can then set up these large language models to be able to, via the REST API, go make a query, right? So I can tell Resolve IQ, hey, I need a list of all the parts with the on hand, beyond this, whatever. And so rather than doing some hard-coded rules, maybe I want to start developing some AI rules around purchasing, for instance. But because that data is available through the REST API, I can pull it. I can give the AI the capability of pulling that data. So you want to be looking for, how do I get to my data? That's one of the practical, productive early steps here, is where's my data and how do I get to it?
So let's take this to the next step. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you how our Resolve IQ plugin fits into this model, only because that's the direction that we've gone, and we'll probably be introducing it to our clients in that way. With the advent of Copilot, I think Copilot came on the market and there were immediately like 1.5 million plugins to Copilot. And so we have a little more pragmatic way of going at this. But the whole idea is pick your entry point. How do you want to interface with your data? And so in this model, we can utilize Copilot, which is integrated into your 365. I mean, there's literally, it's now an icon in 365. You open up Word and there's a Copilot icon right there in your Word doc, for example. The web chat piece, which we've been doing here at 2W for the better part of a year. Teams, we have some interfaces into Teams, so that, for example, if we want to query the history of a service ticket, it will go out, assemble all that information, and then return it back to us via Teams. And then the REST API that Tom was talking about. And then the key is you need to keep your data. That's why you don't want to use Chat GPT. You don't want to put your business data in these publicly available AI tools, because you don't know what happens to it. And so you want to keep your business data in your tenant. Tom, just let's kind of unpack some of that a little bit.
Yeah. So first of all, with the entry points there, again, this comes back to the use case, right? Where are the users in this use case? Where's the data? Mark mentioned one that it was actually one of the early on ones that we did was ticket history. So in Teams, being able to, because that's where our conversations are happening, it's where our users are. There might be a Teams channel of conversation happening about client, Contoso, and someone saying, well, but Contoso's, really looking for what's going on with ticket number 123. Well, being able to right there in that conversation say, Resolve IQ, what's the history for ticket 123, and having it give us back a nice summary of who's been working on it, what's happened, what the next actions are, things like that. That was an early on use case that we needed, that our service manager came up with. And we started there, right? So looking for where are your users, where's your data, the entry points there. And again, it goes back to those use cases. And then the where's your data and how's your data being used. You own your data, and that's most likely the most important asset that your company has, really, is your knowledge base, your data, your intellectual property, your customers, all of that. It lives in your data, and not or knowing how that's being shared and used is really important. So there are these really great to use tools like ChatGPT that are out there on the web. You could take and cut and paste an Excel spreadsheet full of your financial data into ChatGPT and ask it to summarize, or provide any insights or whatever, and you'll get back some interesting answers. Usually, really interesting answers. What's not clear and not well defined is how is that data then being maintained? Is there a potential for it to leak or not? Things like that, and that's still mostly true, that there's not a well-defined thing there, and that's not OpenAI's focus. That's not what they're up to, the company that runs that, or the group that runs that. So when we're talking about using AI on your data, it's 2W's stance that your data is your data and should stay your data. It should stay in your tenant. You shouldn't be shipping your data out to a third-party company or organization or group or whatever to analyze, index, document, whatever. It should live in your tenant, whether that's stored in Azure or some other aspect of your Microsoft 365 tenant, which would still be in Azure. It should be in your Azure tenant, and that's Mark, does that address what you're concerned?
I tell you, then one of the things that we did, and I think this was really a tipping point for productive use, is we grounded our culture documents in Resolve IQ. And so it was, what do we do? What do we sell? Who do we represent? Mm-hmm. Who are our clients? What do they do? And then there were true culture documents, how we, our three basic pillars of doing business, the way that we believe we should be doing business. Those documents were fed into the language model. And that really made a huge difference for us, because now that bot was talking to us like a colleague, because it was grounded in the way that we do business and the way that we think, and the way that we lay things out, to each other and to our clients. And so that was really important to us. And then baking in any additional governance that you believe, over and above the stuff that's already baked into cognitive services and Copilot and stuff like that. If there's other pieces of your organization that you really want to impress within the response that comes back, that's the place to do it, is in that. And that really, in my mind, was the catalyst. We did that in, I want to say it was early summer. And that was really the catalyst that drove adoption, and people started to realize what it could really do for us. And it became it's kind of weird. It became a colleague, not just a tool at that point. And then Tom, let's spend a little bit of time talking about use cases, some of the stuff we've done, some of the stuff we've been asked to do. And let's start with some of my favorite stuff, which is meeting summaries.
Yeah, so I mean, so some of the things that we early on started doing, was identifying, meeting summaries, right? We're all on calls all day long. Again, we've got part of our workforce is remote. We're always on customer calls, vendor calls, everything else. Being able at the end to generate from the transcript or from the recording a quick summary that, hey, here's who was on the call, it's what was discussed, here's the next action items, the next call date, whatever that kind of.
Who's responsible for the action items?
Yes, that was a very important addition that was not early on in there, right? But yeah, who said and who's going to do it, right? So, capturing those and automating that process actually really freed up a lot of time, and it lets people move on to the next call. What we were finding was happening is, you get off one call and it's time for the next one, and you get on the next one, and then the next one, and then wait, who said they were, wait, what was the takeaway from that call at 9 o'clock this morning? That kind of thing. Capturing those has been a real big asset, and it's something we're pushing even further with some new initiatives here at 2W. So yeah.
Yeah, so in customer support, this is a really interesting use case that was brought to us. So let's say you're a capital equipment manufacturer and you've been making capital equipment since the mid 80s, and you may have equipment out there in the wild that go back to, the early 90s. And so you still have to support that stuff. Pieces and parts in those capital equipment get obsolete or have to be repaired. And instead of having that knowledge, that business knowledge, sit in dusty binders someplace, we feed that into a language model. And then when the Peterson flange of the D11N blows a screw, and that screw's been discontinued, you just simply ask, what's the replacement screw for the Peterson flange of the D11N circa 1992? And it would return that in short order, because that small use case language model is in fact your product manuals. And so that's a terrific use case for keeping on top, and because it keeps that what is typically tribal knowledge now begins to institutionalize that stuff in an easy to search for piece. We did that internally by helping our dispatch people grab the ticket and decide where it should go, which research it could go. Resolve IQ looks at that and says, hey, this is the person who is an expert in this particular situation. Let's send it to them. We increased it took 6-8 months to onboard a person to dispatch tickets because there was so much knowledge that had to happen. And I think we're down to under 4 weeks now it takes in order for somebody to come in to the point where I can even do it. So I mean that's the kind of things that happens. Let's talk about Epicor real quick, Tom.
Yeah. So Epicor, and we're Epicor experts, so that's the RERP of choice. But think about your other, where your transactional data lives. Being able to, like I said, start maybe with a dashboard or start in those areas where I want to be able to pull data. One of the great examples we showed off at Epicor Insights last year was it Insights? Yeah, at Insights last May, right? Was show me the shipments that I have going out that might be affected by the wildfires in California. And it was able to go out, look and see where are the wildfires, get the zip codes where the wildfires are, compare those against upcoming shipments, and say, hey, these 3 shipments that are going out of the next week might be impacted. And and then as a customer, you could look and see maybe there's an alternate way that I want to send those or not. In a broader sense, you might actually be looking at a supply chain type question like that, or a shipping question like that. So coming up with, that would be a very narrow use case if you just wanted to build around that one. But looking at, shipping data are, coordinated with, a weather service, or coordinated with your shipping tools, for instance. So that's one area. But really, what kind of data is in Epicor that you could start pulling out? And the other one, another big one, would be summarization. You're doing a lot of that again in your dashboards and other VAQ exports and things like that. But what if you could interact with that dashboard data using natural language, right?
And I want to be sensitive of time here, but you get us going on AI, we'll just go forever.
Yeah.
One of the things that I use almost on a daily basis is document creation. Sometimes you sit down and you're like, you don't know how to start. And just by prompting, hey, give me write a follow-up letter, or write a job description, or whatever it happens to be, if it's grounded in your company culture, you can actually get really good documentation that only then takes some editing for you to work through. Literally this morning, we've got a couple of interviews for candidates for some of our job openings this afternoon, and I took their resume, some other internal analysis that we had on those people, and the job description, and I grounded it in Resolve IQ, and I said, cut me back some questions I should ask this person. And Tom and I were like, holy shit, holy cow, that's some really, really good, those are some really good questions. And so, I mean, it's this kind of stuff that gets you, that saves you time and saves you energy. I do want to leave some time for questions here. Tom, anything in this that we should specifically jump out at?
No, I mean, the use cases also be thinking about it. Where's the repetitive processes happening in your company? Whether it's language-based or somewhere else, there may be some automation that could be brought there. And looking for, is that data-driven? Does it require something beyond a bunch of if-then type statements? If it's a clear flow chart, you probably don't need AI there. But if there's some appearance of intelligence required, AI might be on.
So here I'm going to skip over this slide only because I think we beat that up pretty good. So what do you do, right? So first of all, define your data, your knowledge, and how you want to protect it. That's first step one. I always tell potential clients who want to adopt this stuff, there's a whole lot of unsexy stuff you have to do before you get to the sexy stuff. Evaluate what you're trying to get, what are the goals, right? What data is there, and conduct the audit and the inventory on your data, right? And then design the roadmap. Decide where you want it to go, what's first, what's second, what's third, because what will happen is if you don't have a disciplined roadmap and you start to go down this and you actually find productivity, it will explode within your business because everybody's going to want to take, and we're speaking from 100% experience here. Tom's inbox would fill up like, hey, let's do this, let's do that. This would be really helpful. And so, so come at it from a pragmatic approach. What's the use case? What's the goal? How do you define success? Just like you would any other project. Tom, you got anything you want to add to that?
Yep, that's perfect.
Okay, and then let's keep it real, right? Don't go big. Don't let it become your treadmill. Your business documentation is in file servers. The fact of the matter is you're not going to end up tagging 30 years of Word docs anyway. So let's focus down and look at that. And remember, as you start to adopt AI tools, they're going to come out general. The Copilot is very general, right? It's going to be specific to this email thread or this Teams channel. It's going to be very general, and so don't get discouraged as you go through that and figure out how you want to get there, because the general stuff will be disappointing at first. Anyway, Sue, why don't we open it up for questions here? I know we're bumping up against time.
Does Copilot work with GCC?
Yeah, so it's one of the things we didn't get to here. So Copilot, the general Copilot, the God Copilot for Microsoft 365, right now is not available in GCC. It will be this summer is the roadmap for that. I believe it's June or July is the roadmap for that. One of the things we didn't get to really is that you don't need Copilot in order to be doing AI, though. Copilot, is the tool that shows up in a lot of the Microsoft tools. But if there's something that you're looking at specifically to get started there are other options. Azure OpenAI, the back end that we use for Resolve IQ, is available in GCC. Resolve IQ is available in GCC as well. We haven't really talked about that. Our internal tool that we've developed is something that we are bringing to the marketplace as well. So that's available in GCC as well. So there are AI tools available in GCC, but Copilot, the Copilot for 365, is not yet.
Okay. What UI do you use for dashboard connected to Epicor?
When we're connecting AI tools to Epicor, we're using, so we don't connect directly to the dashboard. What we're connecting to is the underlying BAQ. So there's a business query that underlies that dashboard. So to pull data from Epicor, we're connecting either to the business objects through the REST API, or we're connecting to BAQs through the REST API. Either way, that's what defines the data and that lets us set rules around who can access it and adhere to all the security that you've set up inside of Epicor.
What do I do now, and how much? Oh, were you done? I'm sorry if I cut you off.
No, I want to say something else about Epicor. One of the other neat things about Epicor and other ERPs is that most of those platforms have the ability to call out as well. So a BPM and Epicor lets you make a REST call and pass data out. So you could from Epicor call Resolve IQ with some data about a customer, have Resolve IQ make some AI-driven decision about that customer, maybe a credit decision or something, I don't know, whatever, and then return that data back to Epicor and then display it, or maybe take some other action in your BPM based on that feedback from Resolve IQ. That type of interactive stuff, it's outside of what we've been talking about so much here today, but that type of automation is really powerful and something we're seeing people do.
I think this one that just came in as a follow-up to that. How do users interact with the data from the BAQ? Did you create your own UI for individuals to prompt?
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, so a couple different ways. The web interface, so we've just got a basic web interface that we've set up for that type of thing. So you're just using natural language to ask questions about, hey, from, this customer data or this order data or whatever, what conclusions can we draw, or what part's the most popular, or those types of things. The other is in Teams, driving it through a Teams chatbot. So just within Teams, you're chatting essentially chatting with the data.
Okay, I think we have time.
There's a little bit of a prompt there to tell the language model what the data is and how it works, but yeah.
I think we have time for probably just one more, unless you still.
Well, I just wanted to say, Caitlin, I saw the question was from Caitlin. Reach out through your CSM. You and I could talk. We can get you going down a direction there. I know you guys are dealing with a compliance environment and things like that. I happen to know Caitlin, so yeah.
Last question then. What do I do today, and how much is it going to cost me?
As much as you want to spend. No, what to do today is really that identify where your data is, how's it stored, how can you get to it, come up with some of those use cases, talk to your team, talk to, if you're a 2W customer or not, talk to someone here at 2W about some of the things we're doing, get some ideas, spend a little bit of time getting some ideas on what use cases could be. Sketch out a roadmap. It will change. This is fast-moving technology, so don't get glued to that roadmap, but build a roadmap for yourself, for your company. Those are things you can do right now that aren't really going to cost you anything.
And from a cost perspective, as far as rolling out, Copilot's $30, but you don't need Copilot. It's $30 a user, but you don't need it. And then the rest of it's actually not super expensive, it's just not super expensive to do it. The trick is making sure you got the right data in the right place. But the ongoing costs of the Azure consumption and stuff like that is actually fairly minimal. And and if you use the web interface or Teams, that interface is already there. You probably already own it. Well, in fact, if you're on this call, you already have access to Teams. So it is from an initial investment standpoint, it's not outrageously expensive.
Yep.
Great. Okay, I think that's all we have time for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. If you have questions and you are a client of 2W, please reach out to your CSM. You can always reach the sales team at sales@2wtech.com. Or if you'd like a recording, you can always reach me directly at sue@2wtech.com. Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks,
Thank
Sue.
you.
Thanks, everyone.